I have been repeatedly been told that I'm good at investigation and also prosecuting a debate. I wanted to remember all those who made me what I am as a good investigator and as a good debater. I remember the earliest time I was debating was in PBS Kajiado, Standard 3, where I used to debate against Standard 7 adults. Those days, 1969, 70, 71, we had adults in school because in Kajiado we did not have adult education. And if an adult wanted to go to school, he had to go to a normal school with his own kids. But I also remember the school I completed my primary, because I attended several primary schools. I was classified as a good debater at Mbagathi Road Primary School. I went to Nairobi Technical for my O-levels. At Nairobi Technical, we were concerned that even though we had a club that was called Debating Club, we had another one called Current Affairs Club. I did not join the Debating Club, but I joined the Current Affairs Club. I do not remember the students because no teacher was involved in starting Current Affairs Club, but those students who started it mentored me to an extent that when I went to Bungoma Boys for my A-levels, I was also lucky to find some people who had previous experiences with the current affairs clubs, like Evans Wasike of the National Cereals and Produce Board, who was a classmate, but we also had two untrained teachers. By then they were untrained teachers, Mr. Stephen Matasi and Johnston Wesonga, both who had completed their A-levels at Kakamega High. The two became the patrons of the club, and we started the Current Affairs Club. I can say that during my basic intelligence officers course at CID Training School, South Sea, Nairobi, we had a very good teacher. He was a Mkamba, but everybody used to call him Mr. Okatu. Okatu really mentored me in investigations while gathering intelligence. I also remember, but most of the gratitudes would go to Mr. NYASEDA. That is why this tape is dedicated to Mr. NYASEDA. Mr. NYASEDA taught me, by then he was an acting superintendent of police. Nowadays, the rank is called Assistant Superintendent of Police, before he rose to be the Commissioner of Police. Mr. NYASEDA, at a time I confronted him and said, why was he giving people 15% marks? And he boasted, which of course it's true, that he's the best law instructor or the best law teacher outside a law school. And I've seen most of his students who have gone out to be great investigators. I have in mind Peter Kieti Mbuvi, who even headed a flying squad. I have people like Johnston Mudamba Kola. I have people like Waweru Oburu. There are many. You can see that in their field, especially when it came to investigations, they are just too good. And what do they all have in common with me? We were students of Mr. NYASEDA. NYASEDA, you would say that when he gives you 15%, another examiner would give you 85%. But he was saying that if you got 30 from him, and you went and debated with somebody who got 80% from another person, you will still win the debate. He taught us to look things from both sides, and that is why I even paid courtesy to the debating club, no, to the current affairs club. Debating club, you concentrate on one side, but current affairs, you look at both sides. I remember one day, Mr. NYASEDA caught me. You know, me, I attended a special inspectorate course number 2 of 88. The next class was inspectorate course, normal inspectorate course number 1 of 88. So one day he caught me backbiting him in Luhya. And then, you know, being in Kiganjo in a senior training, you are not supposed to speak Swahili, but I was caught talking Luhya. So one day he challenged me before my classmates, and I talked to him, and that is when he told us that his 15% is equal to 85% of another examiner. There is a time when we were attending that inspector's course in 1988, when Mr. Francis Eliud Washira, the then director of senior training wing, was giving us lessons on HIV/AIDS, and he was insisting that we should abstain. And I told him, what of people who work in places where they are away from families? Mr. Washira asked me, and you know, Mr. Washira was an SSP, and he had under him worked about 12 superintendents. 3 of them confirmed, the rest acting as superintendents, but they all feared him. But then when he talked of that, and I said some of us work in hardship areas away from families, and why should we not, and he asked me a question, Mr. Washira, he asked me, why don't, what of the people in prison? And I said, I've never been a prisoner. And I sat down. He looked at me, and even the superintendents who were teachers were shaking. They thought that I would be given an RTU, that is expelled, returned to unit. Then he told me, who told you to sit down? I stood up, and he told me, I've also never been a prisoner, but I'm talking about your life. The following day, Mr. NYASEDA talked a lot about me. He said that once you are sure of what you are, don't fear people because of their position in rank. Fear the truth. And I've always believed that. He's the only man I've ever seen to date giggle. And the day he giggled, even when he died, I remember in the newspapers, his kids said they used to giggle. There's a day I asked him whether he has been, you know, 1988 is a Bukusu year. So I asked him if he had undergone the rite of passage, and he told me that I tried to get near him. He'll charge me with causing actual bodily harm, and he called that act of passage of in men. He called it you called it male genital. There is FGM. He used to call it MGM, male genital mutilation. And there was a time he could come to our mess, and dance with a big club. Cadet Omondi Siud one time told him that he could arrest him. Of course, they were joking, because he was carrying a dangerous item. And he said, this is just for Kiganjo thing, but when I'm at home, I never walk around with these things, because walking around with a club, Wakoras would take it and hit you back with it. So he said every time he walks around with paper, so that should he get anybody attacking him, he'd pour it in their face. And he would say, once you pour into that person and the person becomes blind, the following day you'll find him saying, he'll change the topic and say he's the one who was waylaid by crooks. But you should never tell him, should never say that, because you'll have said that you are the one who who did attack him. I do recall during my inspector's course, my class teacher was inspector's last board, where the headquarters team had come from police headquarters to interview us. My class teacher, that is a class instructor, Mr. Kemeli, was involved in the parade for the president. So Mr. NYASEDA became our acting class instructor. I do recall where immediately after I had been asked questions, and he was, you know, he's the one who is to march you into the place and then leave you with those bosses, and then we'd come back. When I came out, he asked me how I'd been interviewed, and when I told him, he forgot that he was a superintendent and I was basically an inspector. So we hugged like brothers. Lastly, I had forgotten something about the interview. I mean, the confrontation I had with Mr. Wachira. When Mr. Wachira told me to stand up again, he asked me, "What rank are you?" Of course, I was basically a constable, a Form 6 constable attending an inspector's course, just like Wajakoya. So when I saw the way he was talking, I could not say I was a cadet. I just told him I was a constable, and he said, "You see, a constable answering a senior superintendent that way." Those years, senior superintendents were few and far between, not like today when you have in each county. In fact, some counties did not have senior superintendents. The police officer in charge, OCPD, used to be a superintendent. So he then told me, and you don't fear talking to a senior superintendent that way. Of course, I was shaking. But as I've said, Mr. NYASEDA later thanked me for answering him fearlessly. And that is why I do my research very well. If it is 98%, I don't present. And again, I don't fear consequences of my talking. I fear the consequences of lying deliberately.